Pope must hear this. The priest of dark secrets. St. Benedict's Cathedral stood tall, its golden cross shining under the sun, a symbol of purity and holiness. But behind the sacred altar, sin roamed freely under the cassock of Father Damian. He was not just the head priest, he was a master manipulator, a man whose words dripped with wisdom yet whose actions were drenched in filth. He had deceived the congregation into believing he was God's most faithful servant. But in the dark, he lived a life of forbidden pleasure, preying on the very women who sought refuge in the house of God. It started with Sister Amaka, the choir leader. She was young, innocent, and full of passion for the gospel. Father Damian saw her devotion and turned it into an opportunity. "Daughter, you are special. God has revealed to me that you are my spiritual companion, my Esther in the temple. We are connected beyond the flesh." At first, Amaka was confused. But Father Damian was patient. He showered her with attention, making her feel chosen. It wasn't long before she found herself tangled in a web of lust disguised as divine love. But Amaka was not alone. Sister Funmi, a married woman, had come to the priest for marital counseling. Her husband, Deacon Tunde, was a strong believer who traveled frequently for missionary work. Funmi often felt lonely, and Father Damian saw her vulnerability as an open door. "Your husband is a good man, but even David had many wives. The flesh is weak, but our spirits are one." One evening, after a late night prayer session, Funmi surrendered to temptation. She thought it was a moment of weakness. She didn't know it was only the beginning of her destruction. As months passed, whispers began spreading in the church. Some sisters suddenly disappeared, only to return later looking pale and sickly. Some young girls who were once active in the choir became withdrawn. Then came the rumors, whispers of secret pregnancies and quiet disappearances. It wasn't long before Amaka found herself staring at a pregnancy test with shaking hands. She ran to Father Damian, hoping for guidance, but what she received was a cold, calculated response. "This cannot be known. The devil wants to ruin my ministry. There is a way out." That way out was an illegal abortion. Father Damian had connections with a doctor who performed quiet procedures for special cases. Amaka was terrified, but she was more afraid of being cast out in shame. She obeyed. She was not the first, nor the last. Funmi's husband, Deacon Tunde, was beginning to notice things. His wife was always absent-minded, always in the church but never at home. Every time he asked, she would say she was on a special assignment with the priest. One night, Tunde came home early from a trip and saw a strange car parked near his house. Suspicious, he approached quietly. The shock that hit him when he peered through the window was like a thunderbolt from heaven. There, in his own home, was Father Damian and his wife, locked in an embrace that had nothing to do with prayer. Tunde staggered back, his heart pounding. Rage consumed him, but he kept quiet. He needed proof. He needed the world to see the truth. Just like Uriah in the Bible, he was about to be betrayed in the worst way. Father Damian sensed the danger. He knew Tunde was getting too close to the truth. He needed to act fast. That Sunday, during service, he stood before the congregation and spoke with authority. "The devil is using one of us to destroy this church. There is a traitor among us. The Lord has shown me a vision, a man who smiles in our midst but is secretly possessed by evil." The congregation gasped. Murmurs filled the air, and just as planned, eyes turned to Deacon Tunde. That same day, Tunde was accused of stealing church funds, an accusation fabricated by Father Damian himself. With no proof to defend himself, he was removed from his position and banned from the church. Father Damian had won, for now, but God was not done with him yet. Father Damian thought he had escaped. He thought his sins were well hidden. But what he forgot was that no man escapes the eyes of God. The punishment was coming. The nightmares began. It started with strange dreams. Father Damian would see the faces of the women he had ruined, staring at him with hollow eyes. He would hear their cries in the silence of the night. Then came the voices, whispers in the darkness, calling his name. Damian, you cannot hide forever. At first, he dismissed it as stress. But then the real horror began. One Sunday morning, as Father Damian was delivering a sermon, something strange happened. His hands started shaking. His voice cracked. Sweat dripped down his face. Then, in front of the entire congregation, he collapsed. The doctors said it was a nervous breakdown. But the people said it was the hand of God. And then, the truth came out. One of the women, Sister Amaka's friend, could no longer keep quiet. She gathered enough courage and went to the authorities. An investigation was launched. The church records were checked. The secret abortion ring was uncovered. The Vatican was informed. The Pope himself was alerted. And this time, there was no escaping. Now, the final reckoning. Father Damian was stripped of his title. The once respected priest was exposed as a fraud and a predator. His wealth, his status, his power, everything crumbled like a house of sand. His congregation turned against him. The same people who once worshipped him now despised him. And worst of all, the voices never stopped. Night after night, he saw the faces of the women he had destroyed. He heard their cries. He felt their pain. Until one night, he could take it no more. They found him in his chamber, his Bible open to Proverbs chapter 6 verses 27 to 29. Can a man scoop fire into his lap without his clothes being burned? So is he who sleeps with another man's wife. No one who touches her will go unpunished. Justice had been served. Conclusion. No sin stays hidden forever. They thought they could cover their sins. They thought power would save them. But in the end, the truth always wins. If the Pope must hear this, then let the whole world hear it too. Evil may thrive for a while, but in the end, justice will always prevail. Once Father Damian was exposed, he was stripped of his priesthood. The Vatican would never allow him to stand on the altar again. His white robe, the symbol of his so-called holiness, was taken away, leaving him as just another fallen man. But what next? Could he turn his life around? Or should he go back to the world and get married and have children? Drop your opinion on the comments section. I think two choices remained before him. 1. A life of repentance and solitude. If he truly repented, he could choose to live a life of penance, seeking forgiveness for his sins. Many fallen priests retreat into monasteries or isolated places, dedicating the rest of their lives to prayer and repentance, but without ever being allowed back into priesthood. 2. Returning to the world and getting married. Without his priestly vows binding him anymore, he could choose to go back to the world and live as an ordinary man. He could marry, have children, and try to rebuild his life. But would any woman trust a man like him? Would society ever accept him after everything? Regardless of his choice, one thing was certain: his past would never be erased. No matter where he went, the stain of his sins would follow him. So, would he find peace, or would he live the rest of his days in regret and torment? That is the question only time could answer.